All stories are dramatized recreations. Named locations are fictionalized. Any resemblance to real persons is coincidental.
The couch is too soft. I sink into it, this plush, beige abyss that's supposed to feel safe, supportive. It feels like quicksand. To my left, Daniel is a carefully composed statue. His posture is perfect, his hands resting on his knees, the picture of attentive openness. It's a lie. Every line of his body is a lie woven from 11 years of shared history, and I am only just learning the language. Dr. Evans sits across from us, her notepad balanced on her knee. Her office is calm, a symphony of soft greens and warm wood. A single sunbeam cuts through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing like forgotten secrets in the air. We're here to improve our communication, to reconnect. A last-ditch effort to save something I didn't even know was terminally ill. "Luna," Dr. Evans says, her voice gentle, "last session you mentioned feeling a distance. That Daniel has been preoccupied with work. Can you elaborate on that?" I take a breath. The air smells of sandalwood and vanilla. It's supposed to be calming. It feels suffocating. "It's not just the late nights," I begin, my voice quieter than I intended. I sound small. I feel small. "It's the stories." Daniel shifts slightly. A micro-expression, a flicker of irritation, crosses his face before it's smoothed back into neutral concern. "What stories, Luna? I tell you about my day. I thought you wanted me to share more." "I do," I say, my eyes fixed on the weave of the rug, an intricate pattern that seems to shift and change the longer I look at it. It's the details. They're too perfect. Dr. Evans leans forward. "Can you give an example?" I finally look at Daniel. I look at the man I've shared a bed with for over a decade, the father of my child. I see the faint crinkles around his eyes that I love, the slight wave in his hair that our daughter inherited. I also see the ghost of something else, a shadow behind his eyes I can't name. "The client meeting last Tuesday," I say. "The one at that new Italian place, Bella Not." He nods a little too quickly. "Right, the Lombardi account. It ran long. I texted you." "You did," I agree. My heart is starting to hammer against my ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. "You told me all about it. How the head of the account, a Mr. Gable, ordered the osso buco. How the waiter, a kid named Marco, spilled a glass of Chianti and the manager comped their desserts. How the ambient lighting was just right and they had a live jazz trio playing Fly Me to the Moon." Daniel's smile is tight. "See, I'm sharing, I'm trying." Dr. Evans looks from him to me. "This sounds like thorough sharing, Luna. What about it feels off to you?" The room is too warm. The sunbeam is now directly on my hands, which are clenched together in my lap. My wedding band feels like a brand. "Because it's a script," I whisper, the truth of it crystallizing in the air between us. "You never notice details like that. You're a meat and potatoes guy in every sense of the word. You don't know what osso buco is. You don't know Fly Me to the Moon from Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star. You call all red wine Burgundy." His composure cracks just for a second, a flash of panic in his eyes. "That's not fair. I'm trying to be more descriptive." "For you, no," I say, my voice gaining strength, fueled by a cold, rising certainty. "You're not, you're reciting. You're telling me a story someone told you, a story you lived. But it wasn't with Mr. Gable from the Lombardi account, was it?" The silence that follows is absolute. It's a physical thing, thick and heavy. Dr. Evans has stopped writing. Daniel is staring at me, his mouth a thin, hard line. The carefully constructed statue is crumbling, and I can see the raw fear underneath. "Luna, what are you implying?" he says, but his voice has lost its conviction. It's hollow. And then it spills out of me, the memory I didn't even know I was saving. "The jazz trio. You said they were a trio. Piano, bass, saxophone." "So?" he deflates, confusion replacing the fear. "You told me on the phone that night that the music was too loud, that it was a single guitarist playing classic rock covers." I watch the color drain from his face. "Which is it, Daniel? A jazz trio or a solo guitarist? Because you can't have both. The details are too perfect, but they don't match. You're weaving together two different stories, our story and hers." The word hers hangs in the sandalwood-scented air, toxic and final. I don't know who she is. I don't need to. The truth isn't in the confession, it's in the cracks of the narrative. It's in the too perfect details of a story that never happened, told by a man who is suddenly, terrifyingly, a stranger sinking into the beige couch beside me. The foundation of my life, of our 11 years, of the family we built, just dissolved into dust motes, dancing in a betraying sunbeam. This isn't a therapy session anymore. This is an autopsy. The drive home from Dr. Evans's office was a silent film projected onto the windshield of our SUV. Rain began to fall somewhere along the highway, each drop exploding against the glass like a tiny, liquid star before being wiped away by the relentless sweep of the wipers. It was the only sound, that rhythmic thump swish, a metronome counting down the seconds of our dead marriage. Daniel white-knuckled the steering wheel, his gaze laser-locked on the road ahead, on the taillights of the car in front of us bleeding red into the gray afternoon. He hadn't said a word since we left. Not one. His silence was a wall, and I was on the other side, alone with the echoing explosion of my own words. Hers. I stared out my window, watching Colorado blur into a watercolor of muted greens and gloomy grays. My mind wasn't processing the landscape. It was a frantic search engine, inputting every anomaly of the last 6 months, every late night, every new cologne scent, every time he'd hidden his phone screen from view. The output was a single, glaring truth. The Lombardi account was a person, a woman, an old flame he'd rekindled while I was picking up our child from soccer practice and trying to remember if we had enough milk for breakfast. We pulled into the driveway of the house we bought 5 years ago. The house we painted together, the one with the garden I nurtured, and the porch swing where we'd drink coffee on Sunday mornings. It looked like a stage set now. A beautiful, hollow facade. Daniel killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the soft patter of rain on the roof. He didn't move. I didn't move. We sat in the cooling car, prisoners in our own vehicle. "It's not what you think," he finally said, his voice gravelly, strained. It was the oldest, most cliché line in the history of betrayal. It was so pathetic it almost made me laugh, a hysterical bubble that got stuck in my throat. I turned my head slowly to look at him. "What is it then, Daniel? Enlighten me. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly like what I think. It looks like you've been lying to me for months. It looks like you took the trust we built and set it on fire for a jazz trio and some osso buco." He flinched at the specific details, as if I'd thrown stones at him. "Her name is Chloe," he said, the name a surrender. It hung in the humid air of the car, ugly and foreign. We knew each other in college. It started up again. It was stupid. It was a mistake. Every word was another cut. Chloe, a name with soft edges. A name that sounded like it would laugh easily. Mistake. He reduced the atomic bomb that had just detonated our family to a mistake. A mistake is adding salt instead of sugar to your coffee. This was a calculated, sustained series of choices. Every text sent, every lie constructed, every time he looked me in the eye and told me he loved me, it was a choice. "A mistake," I repeated, my voice flat, devoid of the tempest raging inside me. "How long? Luna, please. How long?" The words were ice chips. 6 months. He whispered it to the steering wheel. 6 months, half a year. Our child had a birthday in that time. We celebrated Thanksgiving. We put up a Christmas tree. He was living a double life through all of it. The nausea rose so fast I had to press my hand against my mouth. I fumbled for the door handle, stumbling out into the rain. The cold droplets were a shock, a baptism into a new, terrible reality. I didn't run for the house. I just stood there in the driveway, letting the rain soak my hair, my clothes, my skin. He got out of the car, standing by his open door, a spectator to my breakdown. "It's over, Luna, I swear," he called out, rain plastering his hair to his forehead. He looked desperate, pathetic. "It meant nothing." I ended it. "I was going to tell you." "When?" I screamed it at him, my voice raw, finally breaking. The sound was swallowed by the rain. "When were you going to tell me? Before or after we renewed our mortgage? Before or after our next communication session, where I got to play the clueless, needy wife?" I saw the truth on his face. He wasn't going to tell me. He was going to bury it, let me live in this beautiful, haunted house, forever doubting my own sanity, forever wondering why the details of his life never quite added up. I walked toward the house, my steps heavy. He followed me, a guilty shadow. Inside, the familiar warmth felt oppressive. The photos on the walls, us smiling, us happy, were accusations. I went straight to the home office we shared, him trailing behind, pleading. "Luna, talk to me. Please, let's fix this." I ignored him. My body was operating on a new, primal protocol. I went to his desk, the neat one, and yanked open the top drawer. He moved to stop me, but I shot him a look so full of venom he froze. "Don't you dare," I hissed. My hands were trembling, but my purpose was iron. I found the external hard drive he used for backups. I found the old laptop he never used anymore. I pulled out his leather-bound journal from the bottom drawer, a gift from me 2 Christmases ago. I piled it all on the floor in the middle of the living room, a pyre of our digital and shared history. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice rising in panic. I walked to the fireplace, grabbed the box of long matches, and returned to the pile. I didn't want explanations. I didn't want his pathetic apologies. I wanted the evidence. I wanted every trace of his secret life and the lies that supported it gone. I struck a match. The flame sputtered to life, a tiny, dancing orange tear against the gray light from the windows. His eyes widened in genuine horror. "Luna, no, that's my whole portfolio. There's work on there." I looked from the flame to his terrified face. And in that moment, I saw him with absolute, chilling clarity. He wasn't horrified by the loss of us. He was horrified by the loss of his files, his work, his precious, perfect designs. I dropped the match. It didn't catch on the hard drive, of course. It just died on the hardwood floor with a tiny hiss, leaving a black smudge. A metaphor for my rage, dramatic, ultimately ineffective, but leaving a permanent mark. We both stared at the dead match. The fight went out of me, replaced by a vast, hollow exhaustion, the kind of tired that goes all the way down to the bone. "Get out," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What?" "Get out." I looked at him and I felt nothing. No love, no hate, just a profound, empty stillness. "I don't care where you go, to her, to a hotel. I don't care. You don't get to sleep in this house tonight. You don't get to lie next to me ever again." He stood there for a long moment, rain dripping from his jacket onto the floor. He saw the finality in my eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. Shoulders slumping in defeat, he turned, walked to the door, and left. The click of the latch was the quietest, most definitive sound I have ever heard. I was alone. The silence of the house was different now. It was mine. It was broken and it was poisoned, but it was finally, truthfully, mine. I sank to the floor beside the pathetic pile of his things, pulled my knees to my chest, and wept for the woman I was an hour ago. She was gone. The silence after he left was a physical presence. It filled the rooms, thick and heavy, pressing down on me until I could barely breathe. I didn't move from the floor for a long time. The smudge from the match stared up at me from the hardwood, a tiny black period at the end of the sentence of our marriage. Hours bled together. The rain stopped. The sun set, casting long, accusing shadows through the windows of the house that was no longer a home. I had to tell our child. That was the first and worst task. Noah came home from his friend's house the next day, all bright eyes and 10-year-old energy, talking a mile a minute about a new video game. He stopped short when he saw me. I was still wearing the same clothes from the day before, my eyes swollen, my face pale. "Mom, are you sick?" The concern in his voice shattered the last of my composure. I led him to the couch, the same one we'd cuddled on for movie nights, and tried to find words that wouldn't completely destroy his world. I didn't mention Chloe. I didn't mention the lies. I simply said that Daddy had done something that hurt Mommy very much, and that he wouldn't be living with us anymore, but that he still loved Noah very, very much. His small face crumpled. "Are you getting a divorce?" The word, spoken in his high, clear voice, was so final. I could only nod, pulling him into my arms as he cried. I held him, rocking back and forth, whispering empty comforts I didn't believe. My heart didn't just break for me. It shattered into a million pieces for the innocent boy whose world had just been irrevocably altered by his father's choices. The days that followed were a monochrome blur of utter desolation. I called a lawyer, my voice a hollow monotone as I recited the facts. Married 11 years, 1 child, infidelity. The words were clinical, reducing my pain to a legal checkbox. Daniel called incessantly. He texted. He emailed. Long, rambling messages that swung between self-flagellating apologies and defensive justifications. It was a moment of weakness. "You've been so distant with your work. We can fix this. I'll do anything." I read them all, each one like a needle under my fingernail. I never responded. My silence was the only weapon I had left, the only thing I could control. I couldn't work. I'd sit at my desk, open my design software, and stare at the blank screen until my vision blurred. Colors, my passion, my livelihood, seemed meaningless. How could I care about font kerning or color palettes when the entire palette of my life had been reduced to shades of gray and a violent, bloody red? The house became a museum of betrayal. Every object had a ghost attached to it, the coffee mug he liked, the chair he always sat in. I started avoiding entire rooms. I stopped cooking proper meals. Noah and I lived on cereal and toast, eating at the coffee table while watching mindless cartoons, the noise a feeble barrier against the crushing silence. The lowest point came on a Tuesday. Noah was at school. The house was quiet. I was supposed to be on a video call with a client. I'd canceled, citing a migraine. I was wandering from room to room, a ghost in my own life, wrapped in Daniel's old college sweatshirt, a stupid, pathetic comfort I wasn't ready to relinquish. I found myself in our walk-in closet. His side was still full of his clothes, his shoes neatly lined up. The scent of his cologne still lingered. It made me sick. It made me ache. I started pulling his things down, frantically, not with the rage of the first day, but with a desperate, suffocating grief. I made a pile on the bedroom floor. Suits, shirts, jeans, shoes. A mountain of the man who was gone. I sat in the middle of it, surrounded by the fabric of his life, and I cried. Not the quiet tears of the therapy session or the angry sobs of the driveway. This was a raw, guttural, animal sound of pain that came from a place so deep inside me I didn't know it existed. I was drowning in it. This was the bottom. This was the empty, airless void I had been falling into since that moment on the couch. I don't know how long I stayed there. But when the storm passed, leaving me hollowed out and numb, my phone buzzed on the floor beside me. It was an email notification. My lawyer. The subject line, Petition for Dissolution of Marriage Draft. Attached was a PDF. I opened it. There it was in stark, Times New Roman type, Luna M. EVANS versus Daniel R. EVANS. I was a petitioner. He was a respondent. We were no longer Luna and Daniel. We were case numbers, assets to be divided, parenting time to be allocated. It was the coldest, most brutal thing I had ever read. It was also the truth. I looked from the screen to the pile of clothes. The scent of his cologne was now cloying, suffocating. This pile wasn't a monument to my grief, it was just stuff, the stuff of a stranger. I stood up, my legs shaky. I walked to the garage, found a stack of empty cardboard boxes, and brought them back upstairs. Methodically, dispassionately, I began to fold his clothes and pack them away. There were no more tears. I was a machine. This was not an act of rage or grief. It was an act of archaeology. I was boxing up the artifacts of a dead civilization. When I was done, I taped the boxes shut and wrote Daniel on the side in thick black marker. Then I pushed them into a corner of the garage, out of sight, not out of mind, not by a long shot, but physically removed from my daily life. I walked back into the house. It felt bigger, emptier, but the silence was different now. It wasn't pressing down on me. It was just space, empty, painful, terrifying space. I went to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and stared at its barren contents. Then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I picked up my phone, not to check for messages from Daniel, but to open a grocery delivery app. I ordered real food, vegetables, chicken, milk, and I ordered a pint of chocolate ice cream. It was a small thing. A tiny, almost insignificant action. But it was a choice. A choice to feed my son. A choice to, in some microscopic way, begin to care for the wreckage of the woman I used to be. The bottom wasn't a place to live. It was just a point of reference, and I had finally found it. The boxes were in the garage. The grocery delivery had come and gone, leaving brown paper bags on the counter like strange, lumpy gifts. I'd made Noah a real dinner, baked chicken, broccoli, mashed potatoes from a box, but it was hot and it had nutrients. He'd eaten quietly, watching me over his fork with eyes that were too old for his 10-year-old face. "Are you okay, Mom?" "I'm getting there, sweetie," I'd said, and it was the first truth I'd told him in weeks. Getting there implied movement. It implied a destination other than the bottom of the closet floor. After he went to bed, the silence returned, but it had changed its texture. It was no longer a suffocating blanket. It was a vast, empty plain, and I was standing in the middle of it with no idea which way to go. My life had been a duet for 11 years. Now it was a solo act, and I had forgotten how to sing. I opened my laptop, not for work, but for escape. I scrolled through mindless social media feeds, a parade of curated perfection that felt like a personal attack. Happy couples, happy families, vacations, achievements. My own feed was a ghost town, the last post a photo of Noah's birthday cake from 5 months ago. The caption read, "My whole world." I'd tagged Daniel. I slammed the laptop shut. The emptiness was threatening to swallow me again. I needed to move. I needed to do something, anything, that wasn't crying or packing or staring at legal documents. My eyes landed on a hiking boot tucked away in the back of my own closet. A single, dusty Merrill boot. I'd bought them years ago, during a brief, optimistic phase where I thought we'd become a hiking family. We'd gone twice. Daniel had complained about the bugs and the lack of cell service. The boots had been retired. On a whim, a desperate, clawing whim, I pulled it out. I found its mate. I stared at them. Hiking. It was on my randomized list. Hiking. It felt less like a choice and more like a cosmic nudge, a parameter set by some unseen hand. The next morning, after I dropped Noah at school, I drove to the nearest trailhead I could think of, Matthew Winters Park. It was an easy, popular loop. I wouldn't be alone. I wouldn't get lost. This wasn't about adventure. It was about survival. I laced up the boots in the parking lot. They felt foreign and stiff on my feet. My body felt foreign and stiff. I was a graphic designer. I sat in chairs. I manipulated pixels. I didn't climb things. I started walking. The first 100 yards were agony, not physical but mental. Every step was a debate. This is stupid. What are you even doing? You should be home, working, trying to salvage your career. He's probably with her right now. The thoughts were like angry hornets swarming in my head. My breath hitched. I wasn't walking, I was fleeing. The path began to incline. A gentle slope, but my lungs, softened by months of grief and inactivity, burned. The mental noise began to be replaced by a physical one, the ragged sound of my own breathing. I had to focus on it. In, out, put one foot in front of the other. I passed a couple coming down, their faces rosy, holding hands. They smiled at me. I looked away, a fresh wave of loneliness washing over me. I was an outlier, a solitary figure moving against the current of paired happiness. But I kept walking. The hornets in my mind were quieting, driven out by the sheer physical effort of the climb. My world shrank to the next step, the next rock, the next turn in the path. There was no past. There was no future with a daunting divorce. There was only the ache in my thighs and the dust on my boots. I reached a small overlook. It wasn't the summit, just a bend in the trail that offered a glimpse of the Denver skyline in the distance, the red rocks formations to the south. I stopped, hands on my knees, sweat dripping from my forehead onto the dry, red dirt. I straightened up, wiping my face with the back of my arm, and I looked. The view wasn't spectacular, not by Colorado standards, but it was a view I had earned. I had got myself here under my own power. No one had carried me. No one had helped me. For the first time in months, I had done something that was entirely, solely for me. It wasn't for Noah. It wasn't a reaction to Daniel. It was mine. A breeze picked up, cool and clean, cutting through the sweat on my skin. I took a deep, full breath. The air smelled of pine and dust and heat. It didn't smell of sandalwood therapy offices or the stale grief of my house. I didn't have a grand epiphany. I didn't magically heal. The pain was still there, a cold, hard stone in my gut. But for a moment, just a moment, it was joined by something else. A flicker. A sensation so faint I almost didn't recognize it. It was a sense of capacity. The faint, tentative belief that I could, perhaps, carry this weight. That my legs could keep moving up this path, and maybe, by extension, they could carry me through the next day and the next. The hike back down was different. My body was tired, but it was a good tired. An honest tired. The thoughts in my head were quieter. They weren't gone, but they had lost their sting. They were just thoughts. They didn't define the path anymore. When I got back to the parking lot, my shirt was stuck to my back and my hair was a mess. I leaned against my car, gulping water from a bottle, and I looked back at the trailhead. It was just a dirt path leading into some scrub oak. But to me, it looked like a door. I had opened it, and I had walked through. It was the smallest, most monumental victory of my life. I hadn't climbed a mountain. I'd climbed out of the hole I was in. and the view from the edge, however modest, was enough to make me think that maybe, just maybe, there was more to see. The hike left my muscles sore in a way that was honest and clean. It was a physical feeling I could focus on, a tangible anchor in the swirling chaos of my emotions. For a few days, the simple act of walking without wincing was a victory. But the hollow silence of the house waited for me each time, and the legal emails continued to pile up, a digital paper trail of my dismantled life. My lawyer needed financial documents, spreadsheets of assets, a catalog of our shared existence reduced to numbers in columns. I was sitting at my desk now. I had to start thinking of it that way, staring at a PDF of our joint bank statement. Every transaction felt like a landmine, a dinner charge at a restaurant I hadn't been to, a withdrawal from an ATM near his office on a day he'd claimed to be working from home. My stomach churned. This wasn't healing. This was torture. I shoved the keyboard away, my hands trembling. I needed to look at something else, anything else. My eyes fell on the pile of legal papers, the petition for dissolution. The cold, clinical language, the stark Times New Roman. It was the visual representation of my pain. And I am, at my core, a visual creature. I am a designer. I speak in color and form, not in legalese. A reckless, impulsive idea sparked. It was stupid. It was unprofessional. It was probably deeply unhealthy. I opened Adobe Illustrator. I created a new document. I didn't open a template for a brochure or a logo. I just opened a blank white canvas, a vast, empty space just like my future. Then I did something perverse. I copy-pasted the text from the divorce petition onto the artboard. The marriage of the parties is irretrievably broken. The words were a jagged block of black type, a hostile shape on the pure white field. I stared at it. My pain, my anger, my betrayal translated into this sterile, formal text. I hated it. I hated how it looked. I hated what it meant. My mouse hovered over the text. I selected it. And then I began to play. I didn't know what I was doing. I was operating on pure, raw instinct. I changed the font. I broke the text apart, separating the most painful phrases. Irretrievably broken, I made the letters large, distorted, overlapping. I turned them upside down. I started using the tools of my trade not to create order, but to express chaos. I took the word respondent, Daniel's new title, and stretched it, warped it, until it was a grotesque, elongated shadow. I took petitioner, my title, and made it bold, central, but fractured, with gaps and cracks running through the letters. I began importing other things. A scan of the matchstick smudge from the floor. A photo of the rainy driveway, desaturated and set to a low opacity, a ghost behind the text. A picture of my hiking boots caked with red dirt. I layered them. I mashed them together. Colors erupted from me, a violent, bloody red for the anger, a deep, bruising purple for the grief, a sickly green for the jealousy. I wasn't designing. I was vomiting onto the canvas. Tears streamed down my face as I worked, but they were different tears. They weren't the tears of helplessness. They were tears of furious, focused energy. I was taking the thing that was destroying me, and I was forcing it into a form I could control. I was the alchemist, and my leaden grief was being transformed into something else, something visible. Hours vanished. The sun set outside my window. I didn't turn on the light. The only illumination was from my screen, a riot of painful color and deconstructed text in the darkroom. I finally leaned back, my eyes sore, my back aching. The canvas was a mess. A beautiful, horrific, emotional mess. It wasn't a piece of art. It was a wound rendered in vectors. It was the most honest thing I had created in years. I called the file dissolution 1PSD. I saved it. I closed it. I felt utterly drained, but the hard, cold knot in my stomach had loosened. I had externalized it. I had taken the internal hurricane and given it a shape, a color, a form. It was no longer just inside me, poisoning me. It was on the screen. I could look at it. I could, in some way, manage it. The next day, I did it again. I opened a new canvas. This time, I didn't use the legal documents. I used a photo of Noah, his smile bright and trusting. I used soft, gentle colors, blues and golds. I created something hopeful. It was clumsy and sentimental, but it was a counterpoint. It was the other side of the coin. I began a series. Some days, the designs were dark and angry, full of shattered glass and distorted type. Other days, they were quiet and sad, washes of gray and empty space. Some were just abstract expressions of a single feeling. The pang of loneliness at 2 p.m., the fleeting memory of a good day, the stubborn flicker of hope. I wasn't creating for a client. I wasn't creating for a portfolio. I was creating for survival. My design software became my therapist, my journal, my punching bag. Each file was a session. Each completed piece was a step away from the edge. I started a private Instagram account. No name, no personal information. Just a handle at Pixels and Pain. I began posting the images. It was a leap of faith, throwing my raw, bleeding heart into the void of the internet. The notifications started trickling in. A like. Then another, a comment. This is so powerful, I feel this. Another, you've put a shape to the feeling I can't describe. Strangers were connecting with my pain. They were seeing it, and in seeing it, they were making it matter. My private alchemy was resonating in the quiet corners of other people's lives. I wasn't just screaming into the void anymore. The void was whispering back, me too. The pain hadn't vanished. The divorce was still proceeding. Daniel was still Daniel. But I was no longer just a victim of his choices. I was an artist, and my medium was my own breaking heart. I was learning the most valuable design principle of all. Even from the most broken fragments, you can create something new. You can reassemble the pieces into a different, stronger shape. The digital catharsis of my art was a storm. Powerful, cleansing, but ultimately unsustainable. You cannot live in a hurricane. After the emotional purge of creating at Pixels and Pain, the quiet of the house felt different. It was no longer an empty void to be feared, but a space to be filled. The problem was, I had no idea what to put in it. My old life, the one with Daniel, was a script I could no longer follow. I needed to write a new one, line by line, and I had to start with the most basic stage directions. What to do with my body when my mind was lost. The hiking boots by the door became my cue. They were no longer a random assignment from a list. They were a promise I had made to myself on that first overlook. A promise that I could do a hard thing, so I went back. The next day, and the day after that, I didn't go to Matthew Winters again. I sought out new trails, each one a little longer, a little steeper. My world, which had shrunk to the four walls of my house and the glowing screen of my computer, began to physically expand again. I downloaded trail maps. I bought a proper hydration pack. I learned to tie my boots so they didn't give me blisters. It stopped being a reaction. It stopped being about drowning out the mental noise. It became a ritual, a habit. My alarm would go off at 5:30 a.m. The world outside was still dark, still sleeping. In the past, this hour belonged to Daniel's shower running, the smell of his coffee, the quiet rustle of him getting ready for work. Now it belonged to me. The silence was mine. The coffee I made, too strong, just how I liked it, was mine. The ritual of lacing up my boots in the pre-dawn gloom was mine. I'd drop Noah at school and drive straight to a trailhead. It was my commute to sanity. On the trail, there was no email from my lawyer, no text from Daniel, no sad eyes from my son. There was only the path, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the burn in my calves as I climbed, the way my breath fogged in the crisp Colorado morning air. I began to notice things. Not just the big, panoramic views, but the small, intricate details. The way dew clung to a spiderweb, making it a necklace of diamonds strung between two sagebrush branches. The specific, spicy scent of the ponderosa pines when the sun warmed their bark. The flash of a blue jay's wing against the red rock. My designer's eye, which had been turned inward for so long, focused on my own misery, began to refocus on the world outside. I was collecting textures, colors, patterns, a mental mood board made of earth and sky. One Tuesday, I chose a more challenging trail at North Table Mountain. The path was steeper, less populated. My breath was coming in sharp gasps, my focus entirely on the next switchback. I was so in my head, in the rhythm of the climb, that I didn't notice the rock until it was too late. My foot turned awkwardly on a loose stone, and I went down hard, my ankles screaming in protest. A sharp, sickening pain shot up my leg. I cried out, a pathetic sound swallowed by the vastness of the landscape. I sat there in the dirt, clutching my ankle, tears of frustration and pain welling in my eyes. This was it. This was the universe reminding me I was alone, that I couldn't do this, that my stupid, newfound habit was just a pathetic attempt to outrun my life. "Whoa, easy there, you okay?" The voice was calm, deep, and came from somewhere above me. I looked up, blinking against the sun. A man was standing a few feet away, his own hike halted. He wasn't dressed in sleek, expensive gear. He wore worn-in boots and a faded jacket with a logo I recognized from a local outdoor coupe. He had a kind, weathered face and eyes that crinkled with concern. I think I twisted my ankle," I managed, my voice shaky with pain and embarrassment. "All right, don't try to move it yet. Let's have a look." He didn't rush toward me. He gave me space, approaching slowly and kneeling a respectful distance away. "My name's Ben, by the way. I'm a guide over at the park. Seen my fair share of trail mishaps." He didn't touch me without permission. He just assessed the situation with a quiet, professional competence that was the absolute antithesis of drama. "Doesn't look swollen yet, which is good. Probably just a nasty twist. You got any water?" I gestured weakly to my hydration pack. He helped me get the tube to my mouth, his movements efficient and gentle. The water was cool and helped clear the panic. "We're not far from the trailhead," he said, his voice incredibly patient and calm. "I can help you back. You can lean on me, or I can run down and get a ranger. Your call." His calmness was a balm. There was no pity in his eyes, no awkwardness. It was just a problem to be solved. It was the positive trait from my randomized list, made flesh, is incredibly patient and calm in stressful situations. I think I can walk if I can lean on something," I said, hating the vulnerability in my voice. "You got it. Here, use my shoulder. It's a pretty good walking stick." He offered his arm, and I hopped on one foot, leaning my weight against him. He was solid, stable. He didn't try to make conversation as we slowly made our way back down the trail. He just matched my pace, his focus on the path ahead, making sure I didn't stumble again. The pain in my ankle was a dull throb, but a different feeling was blooming in my chest. It wasn't attraction. It was something more fundamental: trust. For the first time in a year, I was physically relying on a man, and he wasn't letting me fall. He was simply helping, no strings, no hidden agenda. We reached the parking lot. He helped me to my car door. "You should get that elevated and iced. You'll be fine in a few days." "Thank you, Ben, really. I'm Luna. Nice to meet you, Luna, even under the circumstances." He gave me a small, warm smile. "Take care of that ankle. The mountain isn't going anywhere." He waved and turned to continue his hike, leaving me sitting in my driver's seat, my heart pounding for a completely new reason. It wasn't the frantic, scared pounding of Discovery Day. It wasn't the heavy, sorrowful pounding of grief. It was the steady, strong beat of human connection, of kindness offered without expectation. I drove home, my ankle propped on the passenger seat. The habit had been interrupted. I had fallen. But for the first time, I hadn't fallen alone, and that changed everything. The path wasn't just a place to escape my life anymore. It had just become the place where my new life might actually begin. For 2 days, my world shrank back to the size of my sofa. My ankle, neatly wrapped and propped on a pillow, throbbed with a dull, persistent ache that was a constant reminder of my stupidity. And of him. Ben, the calm in the crisis. I replayed the moment on a loop, the shock of the fall, the pain, the sound of his voice, the solidness of his arm. It was a bizarre, isolated incident, a blip on the radar of my recovery. A kindness from a stranger. That was all. I was bored, frustrated, and trapped with my thoughts again. I opened my laptop, not to my art, but to the trail forum I'd bookmarked. I typed a search for North Table Mountain Trail conditions, but my fingers hesitated over the keyboard. What was I really looking for? Reassurance that the rock was still there? On a whim, an impulse that felt both daring and foolish, I typed Ben into the forum's search bar. I didn't expect anything. It was a common name, but there he was. A user, BenMGT. His profile picture was a small, smiling photo of him with a group of kids on a trail, a sun-bleached banner behind them reading Golden Trails Guided Hikes. His bio was simple. Head guide at Golden Trails. I help people find their path one step at a time. My heart did a little skip. It wasn't just a chance encounter. It was his job. He was a real person with a real life, and he spent his days doing the very thing that was saving mine. I didn't message him. That would be weird. Desperate. Instead, I devoured every post he'd ever made. Trail updates, weather warnings, photos of breathtaking sunrises from summits I couldn't yet pronounce. His knowledge was deep, his passion evident. He wasn't just a hiker, he was a devotee. The trails were his cathedral. When my ankle could bear weight again, the first thing I did was drive to the outdoor coupe whose logo was on his jacket. I needed better boots, shoes that wouldn't betray me. The store was a universe of gear I didn't understand. I stood, overwhelmed, in front of a wall of footwear. Finding everything okay? I knew the voice before I turned around. It was him. Ben, he was holding a coil of rope, looking just as capable and calm as he had on the trail. Oh, hi, no, not really. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. I'm trying to not break myself again. He smiled, that easy, crinkly-eyed smile. Luna, right? How's the ankle? Healing, thanks to you. I'm shopping for insurance. He laughed, a warm, genuine sound. He put the rope down. Let me help. Boots are the most important piece of kit you'll own. For the next 20 minutes, he was a professional. He measured my foot, asked about the trails I wanted to tackle, explained the difference between stability and flexibility. He didn't flirt, he educated. He handed me a pair of sturdy Salomons. These should see you through most of the front range stuff and keep you upright. As I paid, he scribbled something on a piece of paper. Here's my card. Golden Trails, we do a beginner's group hike every Saturday morning. No pressure, it's a good way to learn the basics, meet some people. He said it so casually, so devoid of expectation, that it felt safe. I took the card. Thanks. Maybe I'll check it out. That Saturday, I almost didn't go. The old fears whispered, "You're not a hiker, you're a fraud, he's just being nice." But I thought of the empty house. I thought of the pixelated pane on my screen. I laced up my new boots and went. There were about 10 of us. Retirees, a few younger couples, me. Ben was at the center of it all, a quiet, confident conductor. He pointed out plants, explained the geology of the rock formations, checked on everyone without being intrusive. He made everyone feel seen. When we reached the viewpoint, he didn't just let us take photos. He gathered us around and told a story about the Ute tribes who had once lived in these valleys. I hung back, watching him. This wasn't just a job for him, it was a calling. His patience wasn't an act, it was his default setting. He was utterly, completely in his element. On the hike down, I found myself walking next to him. The conversation was easy. We talked about the best time of year to see wildflowers, the nightmare of a -70 traffic, our favorite weird Colorado weather. It was normal. It was the first normal, non-tainted conversation I'd had with a man in a year. We didn't talk about my past. We talked about the path right in front of us. "You're a natural," he said as we neared the trailhead. "You've got a good pace." "I have a lot of practice running from my problems," I said, the words out of my mouth before I could stop them. It was too honest, too revealing. He didn't flinch. He just nodded, his gaze thoughtful. The trail's good for that, but it's also good for finding things, not just running from them. He didn't ask what I was running from. He just let the statement hang in the crisp air between us, an observation, not an interrogation. I started going on the group hikes every Saturday. It became part of my new ritual. My habit was evolving. It was no longer a solitary act of penance, it was becoming a social act of discovery. I started recognizing the same faces. We'd share water, trail mix, laughs about wrong turns. I was, tentatively, making friends. My world, which had been a black and white film of pain, was slowly being color-graded back to life. One Tuesday, an email popped up in my personal inbox. The sender was Golden Trails. The subject, custom map, the body was from Ben. "Luna, hope you don't mind me reaching out. Was talking with the coop owner, mentioned you're a graphic designer. We're desperately in need of new trail maps for our groups. Ours are outdated and, frankly, ugly. Would you ever be interested in freelance work? No pressure at all. Just thought I'd ask." Ben, I stared at the email. It wasn't a pity offer. It was a professional inquiry. He'd seen me as a designer, not just as a clumsy hiker with a busted ankle. He was offering me a thread, a way to weave my old life and my new life together. To use my talent for something that felt real, that felt good. I looked out my window. The Colorado sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. For the first time in a very long time, the path ahead didn't look like a terrifying unknown. It looked like an unfolding map. And I was finally learning how to read it. The email from Ben sat in my inbox like a sealed invitation to a party I was terrified to attend. Freelance work. The words were both exhilarating and paralyzing. My design work had been my private therapy, a raw and unfiltered scream into the void. This was different. This was for a client. A client who happened to be the first kind, stable, attractive man I'd met since my life exploded. For 2 days, I did nothing. I opened the email, read it, closed it. My finger hovered over the reply button. The old voices, the ones that had been quieted by the rhythm of my footsteps on the trail, came whispering back. "You're not good enough. This isn't your style. You'll disappoint him." It was the same fear that had kept me paralyzed at my desk months ago, staring at a blank screen. But this time, the fear had a competitor. A tiny, stubborn spark of the woman who had hiked out of her own despair. On the third day, I hit reply. I wrote a professional, concise email, accepting the project and asking for all existing materials and specifications. My hand was shaking. It felt like throwing a grappling hook across a chasm. Ben's response was immediate and efficient. He sent over old PDFs of their current maps. He was right, they were a typographic crime, a list of trails they covered, and their brand guidelines, which consisted of a logo and 2 colors. The message ended with, "No rush, use your artistic license." And thank you, Luna, artistic license. He had no idea what he was unleashing. I cleared my desk. I moved the legal folders to a drawer. This space was for creation now, not dissolution. I opened a new Illustrator document and named it Golden Trails Map 1AI. The blank canvas was no longer a terrifying void, it was a trailhead. I started not with the lines of the paths, but with the feeling of them. I thought of the dust on my boots, the smell of pine, the way the light hit the granite faces at dawn. I used a palette of earthy browns, forest greens, and sky blues. I chose a clean, strong typeface for the trail names, something that felt sturdy and reliable, like a good pair of boots. But as I worked, something else emerged. My personal project at Pixels and Pain had been about deconstruction. This was about reconstruction. It was about taking the broken pieces of my aesthetic sense, my love for composition, color, and form, and assembling them into something functional. Something beautiful, something for others. I worked for days, obsessed. I layered subtle textures of rock and bark in the backgrounds. I created custom icons for trailheads, water sources, and overlooks, tiny, elegant drawings that were both clear and artistic. This wasn't just a map, it was a love letter to the trails that had saved me. I was imbuing every line with my gratitude. I sent the first draft to Ben, my heart in my throat. This was the moment of truth. Would he see the care? Or would he think it was too much, too artistic, not practical enough? His reply came an hour later. It was a single line. "Luna, this is incredible. It's perfect. Thank you." A wave of relief so powerful it made me lightheaded washed over me. Then something else, pride, real, genuine, unadulterated pride. I had created something good. I had used my talent for something beyond my own pain. The following Saturday hike was different. I wasn't just a participant anymore. I was the cartographer. I saw the trails with new eyes, noting where a sign was faded, where a junction could be confusing. Ben and I fell into step naturally. "Seriously, the maps are a game changer," he said, his voice filled with genuine enthusiasm. "The group loved them this morning. Everyone was asking where we got them." "I'm glad they're useful," I said, feeling a blush creep up my neck. "Useful? They're art. You have a real gift." We walked in comfortable silence for a while. The ease between us was growing, a natural rhythm as familiar as the path beneath our feet. He told me about his dream of expanding Golden Trails to include wilderness therapy for kids. I found myself telling him about Noah, about his love for science and his terrible knock-knock jokes. I didn't mention Daniel. I didn't need to. My life was starting to have parts that existed outside of that shadow. After the hike, as people were dispersing to their cars, he stopped me. "Hey, I was wondering. I'm scouting a new route on the other side of North Table next week. It's a bit more off the beaten path. I could use a second set of eyes. And a mapmaker's perspective. Would you be interested?" It wasn't a group hike. It wasn't a professional meeting. It was just a hike. With him, the old fear prickled. Too soon. It's a date. What are you doing? But I looked at him. At his calm, open face. at the man who had seen me fall, literally and figuratively, and hadn't run away. He was offering me a new path, both on the map and off it. I took a breath, the clean mountain air filling my lungs. The composition of my life was changing. The elements were all there, the pain, the fear, the love for my son, my work, but they were being arranged into a new, more hopeful picture. "I'd like that," I said, and the smile that spread across my face felt unfamiliar on my skin, like a muscle I hadn't used in a very long time. It felt like mine. The week between Ben's invitation and the scouting hike felt like a lifetime compressed into 7 days. My emotions were a tangled skein of yarn: excitement, terror, anticipation, and a deep, thrumming anxiety that this was a mistake. I was a divorced woman, not even fully divorced, just petitioned. I was a mother. I was a mess. What was I doing agreeing to hike alone with a man? The old, fearful Luna would have canceled. She would have crafted a perfect, polite email about a conflicting work deadline. But the new Luna, the one with dusty boots and a portfolio that now included a beautifully rendered trail map, was curious. She wanted to see the unmapped territory, both on the mountain and in herself. I met him at a remote trailhead at dawn. The air was cold enough to see our breath, and the world was washed in a pale, blue-gold light. He was already there, leaning against his truck, a thermos in hand. He offered me a cup of coffee before I'd even said good morning. It was perfectly black, just how I drank it. I'd mentioned it once, in passing, on a group hike. He'd remembered. "Ready to explore?" he asked, his voice low, matching the quiet of the morning. "As I'll ever be," I said, hoping my voice didn't betray the nervous flutter in my chest. We started up a faint game trail that wasn't on any official map. This was different from the maintained paths I was used to. It required focus. We scrambled over boulder fields, pushed through stands of scrub oak, and stopped frequently so Ben could consult his GPS and take notes. It was work, but it was a shared, purposeful work. And we talked. Not the surface-level chat of the group hikes, but a real, meandering conversation that flowed as easily as the terrain we were covering. We talked about our favorite books. He loved historical nonfiction. I was a sucker for epic fantasy. We talked about the stupidest things we'd ever done as teenagers. I told him about the time I tried to dye my hair purple, and it turned a slime green. He told me about attempting to build a treehouse that collapsed immediately. I laughed. A real, genuine, unforced laugh that echoed against the rocks. The sound surprised me. It had been so long since I'd heard it come from my own mouth. He didn't ask about my past. He didn't pry. He simply let me be who I was in that moment. A woman who could keep up on a tough trail, who could laugh at herself, who had an eye for the line of a ridge and the way a trail should curve to show it off best. At one point, we reached a particularly steep section. The rocks were loose and the footing was treacherous. "Here, give me your hand," Ben said, turning and offering his without a second thought. "It's slick right here." I hesitated for a fraction of a second. Taking his hand felt significant. It was a threshold, but I looked at his face. There was no calculation there, only a simple offer of help, and I placed my hand in his. His grip was firm, warm, and sure. He pulled me up easily, and for a moment I was grounded not just by the rock beneath me, but by the connection. He let go as soon as I was stable. The contact was brief, functional, but it left a lingering warmth on my skin. It felt nothing like the manipulative, guilty touches from Daniel's final months. This was honest. This was safe. We reached the summit we'd been aiming for just as the sun crested the full horizon, flooding the world below us with brilliant, liquid light. It was a view few people ever saw. We stood there side by side, breathing heavily, watching the shadows retreat from the valleys. "Wow," I breathed, the word utterly inadequate. "Yeah," he agreed softly. He wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at me, at the wonder he saw on my face. "It's something, isn't it?" In that moment, something settled inside me. The anxious flutter quieted. I wasn't here as a desperate woman seeking validation. I was here as Luna. A graphic designer, a hiker, a mother, a person who had been broken and was slowly, carefully putting herself back together. And Ben wasn't seeing a project or a pity case. He was seeing me. The hike down was filled with a comfortable, easy silence. The kind you can only share with someone when words are unnecessary. We planned the map in our heads, pointing out features that would be important to note. We were a team. When we got back to the trailhead, the sun was high and warm. The real world was waiting. I had to pick up Noah from a playdate. He had to lead an afternoon group. He walked me to my car. "Thanks for your help today, Luna. Seriously. Your perspective was invaluable." "Thanks for asking me," I said, and I meant it. There was a pause, a quiet, sun-drenched moment where anything could happen. He could ask me out. I could panic. But he didn't. He just smiled, that calm, easy smile. "I'll send you the GPS data for the map," he said. "See you Saturday?" "See you Saturday," I echoed. I got in my car and watched him drive away. I didn't feel the giddy rush of a crush or the aching void of loneliness. I felt a quiet, steady confidence. I had navigated unknown territory today, both on the mountain and in my own heart, and I hadn't gotten lost. I had found my way. I was no longer defined by what I had lost. I was becoming defined by what I was discovering. And for the first time, the future didn't look like a scary, blank page. It looked like a beautiful, uncharted trail, and I had the skills to explore it. The quiet confidence from the scouting hike with Ben became a new anchor in my life. It wasn't a loud, dramatic shift. It was a deep, internal settling, as if the tectonic plates of my soul had finally found a stable arrangement after a year of violent earthquakes. Saturdays were for group hikes, but Tuesdays became our days. Ben and I would scout new trails, him with his GPS and encyclopedic knowledge, me with my tablet and a keen eye for the story a path could tell. We were mapping the wilderness, and in doing so, we were mapping the contours of a new kind of relationship. It was built on shared silence as much as shared words, on mutual respect for the journey, both on and off the trail. He never pushed. He never asked for more than I was ready to give. His patience was a constant, a steady rhythm that allowed my own bruised heart to find its beat again. One Tuesday, I arrived home, my skin sun-warmed, my muscles pleasantly tired, my mind buzzing with ideas for a new map series. The house felt different. It wasn't just my house, it was becoming my home. Noah's artwork was on the fridge. My hiking gear was piled by the door. The light through the windows felt warm, not accusing. And then I saw it. A thick, cream-colored envelope sitting on the kitchen island, propped against the fruit bowl. It was too formal to be a bill. My name and address were printed in a crisp, impersonal font I recognized from my lawyer's office. My stomach dropped. The sun-warmed feeling vanished, replaced by a cold trickle of dread. It was here, the final decree. I approached it like it was a live bomb. My fingers, which had just been deftly sketching switchbacks on my tablet, now felt clumsy and numb. I picked it up. It was heavy. The weight of 11 years, of a family, of a future once dreamed, all condensed into 20 pages of legal paper. I didn't open it immediately. I made a cup of tea, my movements robotic. I sat at the island, the envelope lying between my hands like a sleeping serpent. Finally, taking a shuddering breath, I slid my finger under the flap and tore it open. The language was as cold and clinical as the initial petition. The marriage of the parties is hereby dissolved. Parenting time is awarded as follows. Assets are divided pursuant to Exhibit C. My eyes scanned the words, but they didn't process the meaning. They were just black marks on a page, formalizing a death that had already occurred. I turned to the last page. There it was, a line for his signature, a line for mine, and the stamped signature of a judge I would never meet. It was done. With the scratch of a pen in an office miles away, Luna Evans was gone. I was Luna, just Luna. A sob caught in my throat, but it wasn't the wrenching, destructive sob of the closet floor. It was quieter. A release of a final, held breath I didn't know I was still holding. It was the acknowledgement of an ending. I thought I would feel rage, or a fresh wave of grief. Instead, I felt a profound, echoing silence. The battle was over. The paperwork was complete. There was no more fighting, no more lawyering, no more waiting. The door was officially, irrevocably closed. My eyes drifted from the decree to my laptop. Without thinking, I opened it. I navigated to the hidden folder where I kept the At Pixels and Pain series. The chaotic, angry, sorrowful art I had created from the shreds of my old life. I scrolled through them. The distorted text of the petition. The ghostly images of my rainy driveway. The violent reds and purples of my rage. I had needed to create them. They had been my lifeline, but I didn't need them anymore. I selected all the files, every single one. The cursor hovered over the delete button. This was my final act of letting go, not of the memory, not of the lessons learned, but of the pain as my primary identity. I was no longer a woman defined by her husband's betrayal. I was a graphic designer, a hiker, a mother, a map maker. I took a deep, clear breath, and I pressed delete. A dialog box popped up. Are you sure you want to permanently delete these 47 items? I was sure. The screen flickered. The files vanished into the digital void. The folder was empty. I looked from the blank screen to the divorce decree on the table. Then, I got up and walked to the back door. I stepped outside into the late afternoon sun. The air was clean. The sky was endless Colorado blue. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I felt light, unburdened. The past was finally, truly behind me. It was a part of my story, but it was no longer the title. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Ben. Found an amazing overlook on the South Ridge. Reminded me of you. Thought you might want to map it sometime. A simple message. An invitation to the future. I looked at it, a small, genuine smile touching my lips. I typed back a reply, my fingers steady and sure. I'd love to. Tell me all about it. I was no longer holding on. I was ready to see what was next. The mountain cabin wasn't a dream home. It was a real home. Its logs were weathered by decades of Colorado sun and snow. Its porch slanted just slightly, and the front door had a lock that required a specific, jiggling maneuver to open. It was imperfect. It was lived in. It was ours. The move wasn't a grand procession. It was a slow, steady accumulation of lives intertwining. Boxes of my books appeared next to his on the shelves. My favorite cast iron skillet found a home on his stove. Noah's room, painted a deep blue he'd chosen himself, was directly across the hall from the master bedroom. The first Saturday in the cabin, we decided to christen it not with a housewarming party, but with an adventure. The three of us. A new family unit on its first official mission. Ben spread a topographic map out on the rough-hewn wooden kitchen table. It was one of ours, my design, his data, but this one was well-loved, creased from being folded and refolded 100 times. All right, crew, he said, his voice warm with mock seriousness. Target, the waterfall on Maxwell Creek. Intel suggests the trail is clear, but the final approach is unorthodox. Noah leaned in, his eyes wide with excitement. Unorthodox? Does that mean we have to climb? It means the trail might be more of a suggestion than a rule, Ben said with a wink. Navigator, you ready? He looked at me. I picked up the poorly folded map, its creases stubbornly refusing to line up. I'll do my best, Captain, but this thing might lead us into a bear den. Bears? Noah's eyes got even wider, this time with a mix of terror and thrill. Only the friendly ones, I assured him, ruffling his hair. The hike was everything our new life was, a little messy, full of laughter and breathtakingly beautiful. Ben led the way, his pace patient and steady, pointing out animal tracks and interesting rock formations for Noah. I brought up the rear, my heart so full it felt like it might burst out of my chest. I watched them. Ben, pointing to a bird soaring on a thermal, explaining the physics of flight in a way a 10-year-old could understand. Noah, listening with rapt attention, his small hand trustingly tucked into Ben's larger one for balance on a steep section. The sight didn't sting. It didn't feel like a replacement. It felt like a healing. A gentle graft onto the wounded part of our family tree. True to the map's unhelpful folds, we missed a turn and had to backtrack, laughing as we bushwhacked through a thicket of aspens. It wasn't a failure. It was part of the story. We finally found the waterfall, a silver ribbon of water cascading into a crystal-clear pool. The sound was a roaring silence that washed away the last remnants of city noise from our souls. We ate our sandwiches on a sun-warmed rock, our legs dangling over the edge. Noah chattered about the fish he saw, about the cool moss, about how this was the best day ever. Ben's hand found mine, his thumb drawing a slow, comforting circle on my palm. It was a simple touch, but it spoke volumes. It said, "We're here, we made it." That night, back at the cabin, exhausted and happy, we built a fire in the stone fireplace. The flames danced, casting shifting shadows on the log walls. Noah fell asleep on the rug, curled up with a new dog-eared copy of a fantasy novel, his head pillowed on Ben's old, friendly dog, Bear. I sat on the sofa, Ben's arm around me, my head on his shoulder. We watched the fire, listening to the syncopated rhythm of Noah's and Bear's breathing. "He's a good kid," Ben said softly, his voice a low rumble against my ear. He is, I whispered. He adores you. The feeling is mutual. We sat in a comfortable silence, the kind that only exists when no words are needed. I looked around the room, at the messy map still on the table, at the hiking boots kicked off by the door, at my son sleeping peacefully by the fire, at the good, kind man beside me. This wasn't the life I had planned. It wasn't the picture-perfect future I'd envisioned in my 20s. It was better. It was real. It was built not on a foundation of naive promises, but on the bedrock of resilience, hard-won trust, and a love that had grown slowly and naturally, like a tree finding sun after a long winter. The old house, with its beige couch and silent ghosts, felt a million miles away. That was someone else's life. This, the crackle of the fire, the weight of Ben's arm, the sound of my son's breathing, this was my life. My messy, imperfect, incredibly beautiful life. I had gone into the woods to lose myself. Instead, in the quiet majesty of the mountains, surrounded by the patient kindness of a good man and the resilient heart of my son, I had been found. The upgrade wasn't a new version of the old life. It was a completely new operating system, and it was finally, fully installed.